I'd like to call to order this school board meeting for Monday, June 8th, 2020. For those of you who are joining us, it's a custom that we stand together and say the Pledge of Allegiance in the Lord's Prayer. If you'll join us.
Pledge first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. First question on the agenda tonight, are there any amendments to the agenda? No amendments to the board? Okay. All right. We're going to have, first of all, a presentation from on the North Elementary project update. Mr. Perkins. Oh, there's Dr. Schaefer. Oh, yeah. I didn't know if you were taking a call. Thanks. Yep. How about Dr. Schaefer on this one? Would you like to lead the intro to the discussion for North Elementary?
I would. Thank you. And there's not a lot of leading here on this one other than some introductions. So we've been moving forward with planning on the North Elementary project, and just wanted to give the board a timely update. So with us this evening is Adam Wiesner, who's our lead architect with Parks and Development. And I know Adam's going to do the presentation. Kyle Wooten is also here from Edwards Rigdon. If we have questions that relate more to schedule and bid process, which we're not into yet, but both those gentlemen are here. And Adam, thank you for providing the presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening.
Good evening.
What I'm going to show you is it's also in the ground. So I'm going to be able to zoom in, kind of move around a little bit. So I thought using that screen might help a little bit, show you some detail. As Tracy said, we've been kind of kicking the can down the road, moving this thing along. Been down to the building quite a few times, and quite a few Zoom meetings. We're getting better at that. The design of the building through the internet. But it's going well. Kyle can speak to the cost, but we just completed an easy budget, which is a check. The design meets the budget, and we still have a project still in line. So we're going to move on to one second drawn atmosphere. I wanted to show you some of the changes that have happened. Talk just a little more detail than I did last time. So this first page, it looks similar to what we saw before as far as the color coding that still applies. The red is the work down to the gray, which is a little more minor. But I wanted to zoom in to the additions, just to talk about this pink area in the middle. It says corridor B152. Those are the existing, that's the area where the existing restrooms are from the original part of the building to go down towards the pre-K lane. We did some studies, structural studies looking at that, and have determined that the majority of that, not all of it, but the majority of that is actually more efficient. It's a little more expensive, but it's still within the budget, but a little more efficient to tear down that existing structure entirely, roof everything, and rebuild it. You gain a lot of efficiencies with the floor plan. You gain some space that allows the restrooms to work without having to lose fixtures. So we kind of went back and forth structurally with Kyle and kind of came to that decision a couple weeks ago at our DD review meeting. So that was one thing I wanted to point out at this plan. And then the rest of that scope, similar. I'm going to go to a different sheet for the floor plans here in a second. But I wanted to start talking about what we call add alternates. Since I wrote this 2 days ago, we added a couple more. But these are kind of the wish list items. Boy, it'd be great if we had a better finish in this existing restroom. So we kind of create a list of things like that helps protect budget on bid day. Things go really well. Just a few of these, maybe all of them. If not, you still have a project, you just don't get some of the wish list. So we're starting to create this list. A lot of it is finishes. Number one is the biggest one. These restrooms that are existing going down toward art, the pink there in the plan B127, 128. Base bid, those get no work. And the alternate is to fully gut and renovate them, just like the new ones we're providing up north. That was one of the bigger dollar items that initially we weren't sure if it was going to fit, so we didn't want to protect the budget. So that was the bigger one. The other ones are really just finishes, putting the same finishes in your existing restrooms, the gym and the 2 student restrooms on either side of the media center. Refinishing those so they're up to speed with the new ones that we're doing, things like that. There's one to add. To add additional paving for car stacking space for the north end of the parking lot. That'd be a nice one to get. That list is developing. We bounced it back off the Tracy and team. Like I said, I think we're up to 10 now instead of 8 I have here, but I wanted to point that out. And then as far as the floor plan goes, I just want to zoom in and walk you through a little more. Last time it was pretty schematic. This time it's pretty well locked down. And bring up a few changes. So the front door is still where I was. We're very loose for entry. So the way that we discussed it is the exterior doors, most of the time during the day, would be left unlocked. And as you walk into the vestibule, the doors then into the lobby are locked, similar to what they are now. There's an payphone there. And the doors that lead to the new corridor that goes back toward the pre-K and multi-purpose room would also be locked. So the exterior door, you can get in and out of the leather essentially, and then you're secure. We did add a conference room, see there next to the entry. That was it's currently a landscaped area, and with the new vestibule is essentially 10 by 20 of nothing of leftover space. So it's pretty easy to go ahead and throw roofs over that and give you a room. That was one change that we did make last time you saw this. As I scroll over here, these are the restrooms in the area I just mentioned. Where your current ones are, but it's totally new. Tear down what's there, totally rebuild. And then to the left of that, 2 more identical twin brand new restrooms. So you just double your capacity along that corridor there. And then the multi-purpose room, which again is paste and other functions that can happen there. The shape of it really hasn't changed. We didn't have to drop some columns and hold the roof up, or things like that. That room is still there. And besides that, I think the plan is similar to what we saw last time, it's a little bit more refined. But I did want to show you then what it looks like outside. We spent plenty of time working on the design and the reality of how it's going to look. And I'm going to start with what's there. And the challenges of the 2 very different themes. Buildings, and we're putting something right in between them, so and the front door, so it's pretty important. I initially thought the concrete block part of the building would make the most sense to kind of play off of. And as I started to look at it, it didn't. And I kind of liked the more orange blend brick that was there in the original building. So I went with that, and I was wondering here where it's at now and what the design team, Tracy and team have arrived at. So you can see there's a new front door carrying that brick match in the new building addition. What you're seeing as white is precast concrete with 34 limestone, it's more cost effective to kind of give you an anchor for the new canopy you see there, canopy out. So we could add some color, it adds some interest there, but a nice new front door. It's trying to complement what's there, but again, we're trying to fit in between 2 very unique buildings, and I think that the brick just feels better. This looks better, feels better, so that's where it's earlier. Over here, the precast concrete allows you to do some pretty cool things. The arrowhead that you're seeing there, you can cast into the precast concrete a couple layers, so you get a really nice shadow and depth. So we arrived with the arrowhead at this point where we're going to do that. We're going to do signage. And the brick that's on the building, normal size brick, which means it's 4 inches longer, it's 12 inches long. Very simple on the original building. There's a couple areas where they changed the mounting pattern a little, but all in all, it's pretty much just laid around the wall and run. So I didn't want to get too intricate with this one. But you'll notice as I zoom in here, there's a couple spots where I am playing with the patterning of the brick a little bit, of course, where it's just dressed up a little. There's a little bit of stack bonds on the original building, which I'm going to do with the door alcoves like they did as well, but just to give it a little bit of a nicer look. So it's all the way up standard. And then this canopy that you see, there's no post that cantilevers out about 12 feet. It's pretty wide. There's a good covered area there right above the door. We thought that was nice to get rid of columns and everything off the ground and remove snow around it. Aerial view there of it, but in the current sidewalk that goes to the pre-K entrance, it would be that now, it would be in the building. So we can get rid of that. Thought there might be a nice spot there to relocate a flag. This is the multi-purpose room inside. So again, a little less detail here, a little more straightforward. Again, not copying what was done next to it, but trying to complement it. So you're looking at basically 2 banks and 3 windows on each side of that room, so quite a bit of daylight. The windows are similar to what was on the classroom window right next to it. So I think they'll play well together. And where this is from, the playground will be, it'll get modified. But I didn't want to show the equipment because it would hide it. The building, that's what I'm trying to show you. So, from the perspective of being in the playground, essentially. And then as far as the site goes, the 2 comments I want to show you. A new LED sign on a base, similar to what we had at the high school, but on a smaller scale, but similar in design. And we've talked about at this point sitting on a small masonry base of some sort, so it's protected up off the grass. And moving it a little bit to give it a better line of sight in both directions on the road. And then the gray area there you see to the north was that expansion of the parking lot to give another car stacking lane. There's this new sidewalk going in around the existing gym to help with the method circulation. And then the playground gets expanded. This drawing is not where we have left it. We don't have it revised yet, but I was going to explain it. The grade that you see there is still either concrete walk or asphalt. We need to have an emergency egress walk from our new addition out. What we discussed, we left it last week as Payroll wanted more hard play area around, not just mulch. And we were trying to figure out a big enough size area to imagine that courtyard really wasn't working. So where we left it was, let's do essentially a ring, a loop around the new mulch playground, maybe 8 foot wide, so give them bikes and things to have some hard surface to go around. So it's not drawn yet, but that's where we left it. And I believe, yeah, that site plan was the last what I had to show you. Yeah, please.
Just curious, the sidewalk along the east side around the gym, I mean, that's where is that exactly? Because that's a pretty steep slope from the building down to the dryer.
Yeah, it'll be right on the building, so you won't have any more grass of any kind.
Okay.
The grades are challenging.
Yes.
But it's possible.
So no grass at all there?
Yeah, that's another dimension of what it is off the top of my head there. Between asphalt and the current building, I think the walk's drawn at 6 foot wide.
Okay.
But that might get tweaked, because there'd be nothing to maintain there, there'd be nothing left. So.
Gotcha.
From a safety standpoint, having attended hundreds of basketball games, Little League, and you have to park out front because either walking on a slanted hill or you're walking in the drive. I mean,
and if there's snow and ice.
I hate to say I'm really thrilled about a sidewalk, but that's good. Yeah.
The grade will have to be cut down to get close to work with ADA and everything, but. Any questions on the floor plan or what it looks like? The other document that I handed out was the rest of the overall scope. Some of those things are very small on that list. They're not anything we really show graphically, like changing our lights, things like that. So that's what the other 8.5 by 11 that was handed out indicates to you the rest of the list. The first page of this references the other scope document. That's what that is. So I want to make sure you have that in your hands as well.
Is there anything that you can name that is of significant importance or of any significance in cost even that was removed from the previous scope drafts that we've seen?
Ceiling replacement was a big one. From the initial study, that was kind of just a generic line item, just all new ceilings. But going through the building, there's two things that has to do with that. One, they're in pretty good shape. The ceiling grids almost everywhere are in really good shape. Some of the tiles could be replaced, but not the whole building.
Yeah, we've been replacing them as they get wet from the ceiling. The roof.
Yeah, we do roof now, so we should stay dry. It's not right. But the other part of that was the fire alarm. That was another thing to carry over as just replace the fire alarm system. It turns out you really don't need to. The head end panel is relatively new. We talked to Honeywell that services it. There's really only a few places we need to add new devices. It's big enough to expand that we can add devices on the current system. So those two things save some dollars.
Okay.
And reduce the scope.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that was going to be a big one, the fire alarm system.
Any others?
Did the additional fire hydrants and water main, those look like they're added? How did those get on the list? Is that a fire department discussion, or is that just?
No, those have been there. That was actually part of DLZ's part of their study.
Okay.
And the fire hydrant, I reached out to our civil consultant to have her back. That's one of those grandfather things where you don't have to bring everything up to current codes. If you're building it now, you have to add another one to the current fire code.
Okay.
But that was one of our, boy, it'd be nice if we could do it.
Just a current fire code, though.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing on the other end of that we've added in, not just recently, but as we started planning through, especially with some of the cost savings on the ceiling part, was to address the control systems, temperature control systems in the building throughout. We've had quite a bit of conversation on that, which will be a real nice benefit to getting that updated.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? This is a good time for just open discussion and questions.
I see on here, replace some of the kitchen equipment. What is the kitchen equipment being replaced in there?
That was another line item, that there's a few things that couldn't stand to be replaced, but that could come out of the kitchen budget. So that was another carryover, and honestly, we haven't ever gone down and pinned down exactly which pieces of equipment need to be.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you, that's something that still needs to be tackled.
Was any of that water related? I know we had some issues with the harder water.
Yeah, good question. I think they're just age related. We've
Okay.
been replacing a lot of equipment throughout the district and kitchen equipment to the point where it's causing our food service budget to hurt, and it's getting into operation. So we'll look at, that's a piece we just haven't gotten to yet on here because that's movable equipment. But we get to that point, there could be a piece or two. Like we look at our freezers, our double steamers and things like that. We'll have to look at the age and condition of those currently, and that's where Stephanie Stemke will have a lot of input into that.
Is a water softener in consideration to put in over there?
I don't know. I
Never
don't
come
know.
up.
Yeah, we've not had conversation on that.
Okay.
That's all I have, unless there's anything else, we still have a couple months of work to do and continue to have meetings and refine everything. That's where we're at.
Yeah, sure. One of the questions we had, just want to kind of confirm is we talked about timing, and the timing has been pushed back a little bit. Can you address that and reasons behind that?
Yeah, the COVID was definitely the first curveball.
Sure.
Unfortunately for us, at the same time, our office got hacked twice within a week. So we had a couple interesting weeks there where we were kind of spinning. So that is part of it. So yeah, we're looking at the end of July. The project got to bid now. Early July.
And so from a construction start time, we're probably about a month beyond where we were kind of originally thinking, correct? Or maybe 6 weeks?
About a month behind, yeah. And we're Kyle about 4 weeks to bid. There'll be some time afterwards where Kyle and Jeff go through and validate the bids before they give a recommendation to you and we can sign contracts. That doesn't slow the process down.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the bidders can still start to do the paperwork and be ready. But typically, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but about a month or so between bids, or you can realistically expect something happening, mobilization on site.
It actually, I mean, we hate that you were hacked twice and definitely are not happy with
That was
this.
an interesting couple of weeks.
With this virus, but it's actually probably going to work out well from a construction standpoint time. And we did have some leeway. Matt and Dr. Schaefer, I know we talked with regards to bonds and rates, and the good news is those don't seem to be moving right now. So I don't see it costing us more, just maybe buying us a little bit more time.
And we have had, I wanted to talk about phasing. We don't have that yet. We're getting to that between school and me and Kyle trying to figure out how we attack this. Now we know where we're building, what we're renovating, and if it's budgeted, we figure out how we're going to do it. And so at this point, we're trying to strategize where we start, how many rooms can we empty out.
Yeah.
Parents always trying to put those pieces together. And it's getting there, but it's nothing that I can show you tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, one of our last meetings, Karen had been, she was kind of asking that same thing as far as where we would start. And she definitely preferred, she thought it would be better, which it works out time-wise right now, where the kids actually, as long as we're all back to school, the kids are back at school for a little while, get used to it, and then we start phasing and possibly move some kids down, instead of hitting them as soon as they come in, what's going on, how you can use the rebound ones, and make that adjust.
Great. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments? Great. Thank you for your report.
Great, thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, one of the things that we're going to be doing in our meetings a little bit differently, this has been brought up by a number of people. One of them here is Mr. Potter's asked, and I think Mr. Burnworth, a few others, have asked that we might consider changing our meeting format to allow for public comments to be taken in a more timely manner versus the very end of our meetings. We discussed that as a board, and that makes perfect sense to us, and so that's what we're going to be doing. So if in the future, as you come to a meeting and you'd like to make a comment, there are always the sign-up sheets in the back where you sign your name, but there's going to also be a section on that sign-up sheet for the agenda topic item. And that way, as I'm walking through the agenda, if the conversation permits, what I can do then is stop at that point and let those individuals who have signed up for those agenda items to address state with their concern or idea, and then we can continue along with our discussion point and from the board's perspective of that agenda item. So we started that this evening, and that was on the sign-in sheet. And so I would like to pause real shortly and allow one of our citizens who have signed up, Mr. Winters, David Winters, go ahead and come to the podium. He wanted to address concerns or thoughts on the agenda topic item 2B, which is school reentry planning process. Just like Mr. Winters, just like we've allowed at the end of our meetings, we'd ask that the community hold their remarks to about 3 minutes so that we can continue to stay on course. I'll yield the floor to you for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, and the board. I always appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to those who are in charge of making decisions. I think it's important that citizens to stay involved, so I appreciate the opportunity. I have a few things in Danville, but tonight I'm coming here as a parent of 2 kids in the school system. I have an incoming junior and an incoming second grader, so that's a balance right there. You know, this has been a crazy few months, to say the least, and I know folks like yourself, the town administrators, they're in tough places, make tough decisions, and so I know it hasn't been easy for everyone. But I did come across, as many of you have probably seen, which is probably why it's on the agenda tonight. I saw a mini star article where they came out with guidelines, recommendations for how to open the schools this year. And so as I read through that, I glanced at the official document. Those are not as fun to read as the articles, but I did look at that. And the first point, you know, again, from a parent's perspective, I want to underscore that these are recommendations and not mandates. And I think that's very key. What I took away from that is that the school boards, the school superintendents, they have the discretion on how much, if any, of those guidelines to implement. The second point I want to make is that the experiment of learning from home did not go well, I think, for a lot of people. And I won't give names, but I know that there were some parents of elementary school students that were just finishing the assignment to get it done. And I don't think that worked out very well. And as we are continuing the opening up plan in Indiana, folks are going back to work. I think that there'll be parents who were able to stay home for those 2 or 3 months. They're going to be back to work, and that'll create an undue hardship for the parents as well. And so, moving on to some of the specific requirements. This comes as no surprise. I'm not a doctor. I don't think to be one, but I pay attention to things, and I've seen some different stories about the necessity of face masks and things like that. And I think that there's enough concern there that maybe we shouldn't require those, especially for young folks. I can imagine my 7-year-old daughter going all day with a mask on her face. And so, as you contemplate that, I would ask you to seriously consider not doing that. And the other thing out there, and this is stuff that I've heard from multiple sources, the virus itself, the least vulnerable class is that younger generation, that 0 to 18 years. And so, we're not putting a highly vulnerable group of people back into a situation where they could contract a serious illness in large and in mass anyway. So I don't think that's something that we should require the students or even the teachers to wear. Now, if they want to, parents are more comfortable, teachers are more comfortable. On the subject of social distancing, if you've seen a first, second, or third grader, that's probably not very practical. And so I think that what that could do is divert the attention of teachers from teaching to being more concerned about logistical positioning. And I don't think that's good for the students, and that's not good for the parents. We tell kids to stay in line, file in line, stay here. Now we're going to tell them to watch their distance and make sure they're staying 6 feet apart. So I don't know that there are many schools that are going to really try to put that in there. So I would support we consider that. Finally, on the topic of schedules, there's been some talk about having alternate days where some go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I don't think that's a good idea either. It's disruptive. One of the things that I've learned, and I don't know everything, but I was a youth pastor and I have 2 kids. What kids really need is they need consistency. They need that structure. And that loose structure, I don't think is good, especially for the young kids. And don't take our Saturdays away from us. And so that's really what I wanted to say tonight is that, as you go through the next few months, that it's going to be pretty quick when you make these decisions, just consider the practical applications of what we need to do to make sure things are safe. I don't think we need to go to those extreme measures. And my personal opinion is if we do follow every single guideline, cancel football, cancel basketball, cancel all extracurricular activities, because if we're going to follow it in school, we have to follow it on the field. And so as you go over the next couple months, I just ask you to consider this.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, as mentioned, is a school re-entry planning process. Dr. Schaefer?
Yeah, the topic here is intentionally the planning process and not the plan, because the plan doesn't exist yet for a lot of reasons. We just received guidance from the Department of Education on Friday. The document first came out, so most of us have now read through the 38-page set of recommendations, and it appears that the early part of that was written specifically by the department. Much of that was guidance from the CDC, and then some appendices there from everything from social distancing down to working with athletic programs and extracurricular activities. But what we've been doing as a district, we've convened a planning group, our reentry task force, and really trying to think more at the 30,000 foot level, figuratively to begin with, looking at items including governance, overall wellness, instruction, operations, facilities, post-secondary opportunities as this year's seniors moved on and next year's juniors become, or this year's juniors become next year's seniors, and looking at post-secondary opportunities and how those may be disrupted in technology. So we have a planning group working on each of those areas, looking at what are factors we need to consider, some of those special considerations, and then ultimately what are some recommendations on how to approach some of these different items in different areas. So this week, we'll be bringing that group back together to sort of debrief some of those collective thoughts and recommendations. In the meantime, we're also collaborating with the other Hendricks County school districts, specifically the superintendents, and sharing some ideas and thoughts on planning moving forward. And we're going to be getting together this week, actually tomorrow. Two things should be happening tomorrow. One is the Department of Education. Dr. McCormick will be giving a verbal overview of the planning document and some additional thoughts and answering questions related to that. And then tomorrow afternoon, superintendents, we're going to be getting together and doing some common planning, because we don't think it's necessarily wise that one district is doing something totally different than a different district when we're essentially serving the same county. So we want to make sure that we're not exactly doing everything the same, but at least as, again, figuratively, maybe from a 20,000 foot view or 10,000 foot view, we're on roughly the same page. If it makes sense for one district and bring all students back at the same time, then it would probably make sense for all districts in Hendricks County to do that, just as an example. Or if one district was going to do everything virtually, it would probably make sense for all districts to do that. So we want to have a conversation about that and just see where our rough planning is now that we have some guidelines from the department. What we want to do then is put together a plan that's more of a countywide plan to then present to the county health officer and ask for his guidance and input and reflection on that plan. So that's a planning direction we want to take, because there are many considerations that we might not think about until we go very deep on these things. When you have the Center for Disease Control making recommendations to you that are based on federal findings, and you choose to follow them, is one thing. When you choose to not follow them, can have other implications, particularly if sickness does spread into buildings. That can have legal implications and things of that matter. So we want to make sure that our plans and our collective plans, even countywide, even though they won't be exactly the same, but they have some similarities, they have some common sense in them, and that they are vetted by our local county health officials so they make sense here in Hendricks County. So that's one of the other hurdles that we want to make sure that we clear and do that confidently. What we'd like to do then is here locally, we're going to vet our district plan then with our buildings. Make sure that, for example, if we find that social distancing is necessary in the school buildings, what's that going to look like? For example, I think social distancing to some degree can occur, some degree in transportation, but not to a full degree. And if you had a chance to look through the guidance on transportation, you'll see there is very little in that plan, because there is no great plan for transportation and social distancing. There are some things you can try to do. There are some things you can try to encourage. But at the end of the day, you have to get kids to and from school if you're going to have school. And you try to do it in the safest way possible. If budget were never a consideration, we could run just multiple busing routes, but that just cannot functionally happen. So we have to figure out the safest and best way to transport kids, as an example. But if we decide to social distance there, or we find that social distancing can happen as we release kids into the building, or we find social distancing can happen when we're dismissing kids at the end of the day, or at hallway passing periods, or at lunchtime, or in classrooms, then the policy would be to have social distancing to the best of our ability. However, that will look far different in South Elementary at lunchtime than it might look at the high school at lunchtime, because those classes are set up differently, they're dismissed differently. But so what we want to do with the district plan is to lay out one of the pieces of the CDC guidance that we think that we can implement, but then let the buildings have a lot of decision-making in exactly what that looks like in their building so that it functions properly as you go from building to building, as is age appropriate, space appropriate in the different buildings. So we want to make sure the buildings can vet those things and then take them down to their level, how it needs to work in their buildings. So then what we want to do is then be able to have a complete guidance document, at least at a district level, and then for each building, they can flesh that out in detail so to know exactly what that would look like and how it would be executed at the building. We need to consider things like, can and should we do temperature checks? What are our screening procedures if a student comes down to the nurse's office? How do we socially distance in the buildings? How do we transport students? if we have, so a lot of those things, we would put in a column that are preventative measures. But what happens when you have a case of sickness in your building? You have a confirmed COVID case. What's that going to look like? If you saw the planning document from DOE, or actually those CDC guidelines, what that looks like is, you'll likely, or at least the recommendation is to close for a day or two, do some contact tracing, figure out who may have contacted whom in that period of time, clean your buildings thoroughly, and then get back in session. And then do your screening outside the building. And talking with some of our local health officials as well over the last couple of weeks, that's becoming more of a thought pattern of try to do your best you can to screen and keep ill people out of your buildings. Parents, please don't send your children to school if they have a fever, if they're not feeling well. Try to be as preventative as we can, try to have school as normal as we can. And again, if and when sickness strikes, then we try to identify those students or employees and make sure they're safe, try to keep them out of the school system and from around other people for a reasonable time frame so they can get healthy and not pass that to anyone else. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about right now, and some of our planning efforts to date. I would think here probably within the next week and 10 days, we're going to have a draft plan and begin to get vetted at the building level.
Questions, thoughts, concerns? I'm sure we have like a million of them, but maybe the top level.
I'm gonna wait until Leslie's present.
I'll just say, the right questions I know are being asked and the right questions are being discussed. I guess the bigger question is, as a greater community, whether the school board, the school administration, the county, to the extent that there's some coordination between schools to come up with some reasonable responses to the challenge that's before us, is how intelligent and thoughtful are the answers to those questions, right? And so as one member of the board, one of my concerns is that we continue to, I know we will internally with our group, but to the extent that others are wanting to have some sort of consistent approach, other school corporations, that bothers me a little bit, and that not just because it bothers me to the extent that it would hinder our efforts and with our students and the environment that we have. We have a little bit of a different population of students. We have a little bit of a different school setup with the number of schools we have, the number of resources we have, heck, with the number of school buses to students, all those different kinds of ratios. So for me, it's, what's the best for our 500+ students and for our faculty and staff. And then what can we do to be consistent? And I think Dr. Schaefer is onto something, though, with regards to the other schools. For example, if the other schools decide, hey, it's time to still stay at home and do e-learning, and we're the only school that says, nope, we're going to be at school, and we feel that the value is for that education to take place in person. What could potentially happen is you could have a flood of people wanting to, come into your school corporation. And so, obviously we have limits on the number of students that we accept, but that could create a big issue. Flip that around. If we were the only school that wanted to continue distance learning and everyone else is doing that in person, you could have a flood of students also leave Danville to go to other schools. So there are some reasons, I think, that are intelligent for us to be thinking about consistency within the different school corporations, yet keeping in mind that our charge are our students and families and our faculty and staff. So I know that you know that, but I know it probably goes unsaid, but just want to encourage you in the next few weeks as we're working through those to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think I won't speak for the other superintendents, but I think we're of like mind that think the effort here is to coordinate, not compromise. I mean, I don't think any of us are going to compromise what we feel is best for our districts. If we can communicate what we're doing, what we plan to do, and think through that a little bit and coordinate our efforts, we think that makes a lot of sense because we're all sort of the same county community.
What kind of, I have a few questions, what kind of feedback or guidance have you had thus far from the county health officials?
We've had probably, I don't know, Mr. Perkins, maybe 3 different Zoom meetings where the county health officer and the coordinator have been part of those conversations, and really just trying to understand what are our local hospitals seeing right now, what are some of their guidance as well. And it's been more, I think, more exploratory. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, including the meeting we had last week. I mean, I think people are still getting the lay of the land, trying to make a determination of what it does look like 2 months from now.
And are we going to be required to submit reopening plans, reentry plans to our county health officials, and/or do you see a situation where we might be required to submit those plans to the DOE or the governor's office?
I would probably be of a stronger opinion that we'll be required to give those to the Department of Education. We've not been requested or required at the county level. That's why we feel like it's good here to coordinate locally and then take that plan to county health official, ask them to vet that a little bit, let us know their concerns, and hopefully can give us clean bill of health on that. We feel confident in implementing.
So I talked, obviously, a lot of principals around the state. Do you have any kind of indication, because some of them have heard from parents already who are saying, I ain't sending my kid back? Have you had much contact from people here in the community, either saying,
Honestly, no, not to this point. And quite honestly, it may be just a little bit early. A couple of planning efforts that we're considering doing, which would be probably more towards mid-July as we get a little bit closer to the start of school. And pardon the pun, be able to take the temperature of the community a bit better at that point. But we want to, I use the term survey loosely, but get feedback from our employees and also get some feedback from our parents. Just to kind of find a comfort level. I think just because of work and economic conditions, things like that, I think many parents want to and need to be able to go to work. They need for their children to be cared for through the school system and educated. So that's what we would like to try to accomplish, as long as we feel like we can do that in a safe and responsible way. So that would be our first and foremost thought. And then trying to balance a lot of safety considerations and screening issues and things like that, so we can be as preventative as possible to prevent the spread of COVID, but at the same time try to get our mission of educating children done is to the best extent that we can. We do feel like there will be a number of students, and we don't know what that is yet, that might need to be still separated from the general population due to health concerns, or maybe just not feeling confident being in large groups yet. So we are trying to look at some virtual learning options and have some solutions for that, K-12. But our hopes would be that we could get all of these students that can be and want to be here back in school on time.
thank you.
First, Mr. Winters, thanks you for coming and your comments. Appreciate that. With a lot of the concerns with the e-learning, have we been able to get feedback from the ones that had concerns with the e-learning to see what those concerns were and see what adjustments we could make to?
Yeah, we've received feedback and some solicited feedback too that we've asked for. And you learn and grow as you go. Everyone was thrown into that experience at the same time, and without a lot of preparation or warning time. So I feel like our school committee did a great job. But that doesn't mean we did a perfect job. I think given the conditions and situation we had, our people did a great job, but you learn. You learn how to be more fluid with it, and it's given us some opportunities to grow a little bit as a district and create some opportunities for kids moving forward. So as we look at how can we intentionally provide more options for students to learn, We think ultimately that will be a benefit. But just having the opportunity to develop the online lessons, because that was a path we had just headed down this past year, is to begin to develop online lessons for one course. And teachers were suddenly thrown into a situation they had to have prepared curriculum for all courses, which is really unfair circumstance that they were put into. Now they have a lot of that developed. We've learned about much better how to communicate back and forth through media like Zoom to have face-to-face interactions with students. We know that on the social emotional side of things, that's very important for students to be engaged and have contact directly with their teachers. So we've learned better ways to do that. But again, we're all at different learning levels, even as adults, in our use of technology. So we've all grown through that process as well. So, we hope to not have to do that for any extended period again. But at the same time, I think if we do, we'll be much better prepared to do so.
I think there might be some people out there that got a hard lesson too on what teachers go through in the trials and tribulations in the classroom, and
I think so.
we owe it to them, because the teachers that were having to do those lesson plans and do the e-learning were also having their own personal lives to contend with while they were doing that as well. So
If you remember, e-learning was set up for snow days that extended months.
yeah.
And other parts of the country having the same issues. Some teachers and students connect online well, some don't. So I've experienced that talking to other people in other states, and it's not a Danville problem, it's a nationwide problem, and public schools just aren't set up for virtual learning. That's why they're public schools. You go to school and you learn in different modes. So, and one of them being is on hand, right there. So it's just we're in a tough mode to do that. Hopefully, and I'm all for getting kids back into school to do it safely. But I think they'll learn better. I think the product's better when they're in school.
Yeah, there's I don't think a better way to convey instruction than direct face-to-face working directly with the teacher. Certainly two-way video conferencing and some of that is next best. And I think our staff got better using those types of modalities to deliver instruction. But again, the technology, even this day and age, for everybody is a bit limited in that respect too. When you're working with one student is one thing. When you're working with 25 or 30, it's a bit different way to manage that. So I was encouraged to see in the Department of Education recommendations would be, even if you had some identified sickness, that you would maybe only close for short durations of time, and then you could shift to e-learning during that phase and then reopen, bring everybody back. It would also give you an opportunity to see if you had a student or an employee, who had they been in contact with? Are there other buildings that siblings go to? Is transportation shared? Those types of things, so that you can decide which areas you need to address more tightly in terms of screening procedures, but then get back into session. And the longest closures I saw for recommendations were probably around 10 days. Longer if you had extenuating circumstances or a wide outbreak, but hopefully we won't have any closures. But it sounds like the first line of defense for those are short-term closures, shift to virtual learning, and then shift back to in-person learning.
It wasn't that long ago, right, when we shut down, and I remember the discussion vividly being about flattening the curve, right? That was the clarion call to everyone. We're trying to flatten the curve. It wasn't about eliminating all individuals from contracting a virus. It's impossible. The curve has been flattened. We're watching a lot of data, and obviously there are a million eyes on the data from every state. But one of the things that I caution us about is when it comes to a positive case, it's going to happen. We're going to have a child who's going to get a positive case of COVID-19. And we have to, I think, be using medical professionals' opinions, but weight that with the seriousness of what it is they're facing. This is probably the first time. This probably isn't popular, but it's never stopped me before, I guess. But This is maybe the first time in at least 50, 60 years, maybe over 100 years in American history, that the entire population is being asked to do things to protect a very, very small, from a mortality standpoint, percentage of the population that's passing from this disease. And with a population of children who we know, as I think Mr. Winters stated, and all the data points to this, is that the least vulnerable group is that 0 to 18 group. And so with that being the case, the current concern can't be, we're gonna freak out if 2 or 3 students have contract this disease, because they might go home and give it to so-and-so and so-and-so, and eventually transmit it to someone who has a compromised immune system or is very elderly. Because if we do that to a lot of the constituents who've talked to me, their point is we might as well not go back to school. That'll happen. And so you can't stop that from happening. So I guess what I'm asking is for just a really careful, balanced approach. I think I was talking with a commissioner from the state of Indiana today, and he said what we've done is we've allowed the medical community to call all the shots until just recently. And now economists and business leaders and now education leaders are having a little bit more of a say as to how we approach this now that we know more medical data. And so anyway, I just want to encourage you with that. One, we know that this is it's less deadly than we thought it was maybe 4 months ago. Have a responsibility to keep our students safe, but we also have a responsibility to educate. And I think we all know to a person, whether we want to admit it or not, that online learning clearly isn't as effective as what we've had in the classroom. And lastly, and I'll shut up, is during the campaign for the referendum, one of the things that was talked about was the importance of the classroom teacher. One of the things that we said on the meetings that we had was that the most powerful educational tool on the planet, other than mom and dad, parents, is a classroom teacher. And that's really watered down when you do that online. So that's kind of where my position is as one member of the board with regards to our approach has to be balanced. I'm glad that educators are now having a bigger say, and it'll be interesting to see what our governor does and what kind of planning we either get to continue along or throw out the window because we're mandated to do something differently.
Appreciate all the board's comments and suggestions, and I am thankful too that we are getting some guidance and some flexibility in that guidance too. There are a few mandates in there, but there are also some things that, even though the recommendations, we have to think about very seriously in terms of the side of safety versus the side of practicality of being able to educate kids here in the community. And we will do all that. We'll think through those very carefully and get the input from many people here locally and try to come up with the very best decisions that we can to benefit all of our kids and our employees as well.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. I know it's a big task, one that you didn't study in college or you didn't write a paper on this, did you?
Did not.
I don't think so. Okay, moving on the agenda, line item 3A, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last board meeting?
So moved.
First, we have a second. Second, do I hear any discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
I'd like a clarification in action F. It's the third paragraph that starts with my name. I think it'll last for a second, about halfway through there, that Mrs. Comer Elliott stated, without this resolution, a first step that will allow our district to refrain in the future. I think I was trying to say that will be without it will be restricted. Maybe restricted rather than refrain in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We don't take this step.
Do we have a motion to, I'm going to take another motion. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended using replacing the word refrain to restricted. For Ms. Elliott's comment.
So moved.
All right, first, second. Second, discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Elliott.
Thank you.
Number 4, item A, consider approval of financial reports. Mr. Parkinson.
At the end of the month of May, we had $11,700,824.40 in our property tax and state tax supported funds. The education fund had actual expenditures of $1,283,109.65. The operations fund had actual expenditures of $496,763.19. We transferred $189,974.84 from the education fund to the operations fund. And for the upcoming month, we intend to transfer $195,667.13 from the education fund to the operations fund, which will bring our total transfers to the year to 15% of our projected state tuition support. And I do want to note, there's a timing matter here, and there's some good news here. Normally, we receive our spring property tax distribution in the month of June and make our debt payments also in the month of June. So we actually have normally high cash balance this month. They'll come back down and make our debt service payments in the month of June. Just a timing matter. The good news there is the county was kind enough to work to get us that money in advance, so we know exactly how much we received. We knew there was some concern about property tax collections this cycle, and we did quite well. We asked for your approval a couple months ago to engage in short-term financing if we had to, if our property tax receipts came in low. Not going to be an issue. We're not going to need to do any sort of short-term financing, so that's a cost savings for school corporation taxpayers.
I have a question. Do we expect more to come in August after the rest has been collected through the new deadline of July?
We do. Our collections were slightly down relative to this time last year as a percentage of our property tax levy. So the executive order from the governor extended the property tax deadline to where folks can now pay in early July under certain conditions. This is non-mortgage taxpayers or non-escrow taxpayers. And the county's plan is to distribute that money in August. So yes, I do expect that we're going to receive a supplemental property tax distribution at a time that we wouldn't.
It could include a lot of corporations.
Right. You would expect it to mostly be commercial taxpayers.
Any other questions?
Yes, I know the answer to the question, but I just want to make sure I reiterate it, that 15% transfer is the number that the state legislature asked schools. They didn't require it, but they strongly recommended schools stay within in that transfer, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Parkinson, and we were down what percentage again? I think we got this in a local report, but for the record, about what percentage of a decrease from our normal property tax revenue?
A little under 10%, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8%. That represents our post-circuit breaker property tax levy collected at this time this year versus this time last year.
So obviously a drop, but not as catastrophic as we were thinking it might be.
It could have been a lot more challenging for us.
Any other questions or discussion? Do I have a motion to accept the financial report by Mr. Parkinson?
So moved.
Mr. Mason, do we have a second? Dr. Beatty, any other questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item 4B, approval of claims, Mr. Perkins.
This month we have $8,883.94 in pre-written claims for your approval, $252,662.05 in additional claims, for a total of $261,545.99. I'd request your approval for those claims.
Do I have a motion to approve the claims as presented by Mr. Parkinson?
So moved.
Mr. McRoberts, do we have a second? Mrs. Elliott, questions or discussion?
I do have one question. On the co-alliance, I know a lot of times that they will have a minimum amount of usage with the fuel. Do we have that with them on diesel?
Good question. I know we just have been exploring that a little bit, so.
Yeah, at this point we don't. We are, so diesel prices are down right now, gas prices are down. So we made the decision for the sake of taking advantage of those lower prices and some budget predictability to lock in a portion of our upcoming school year's diesel prices or diesel purchase. We purchased about 25% of what we would anticipate using. So we are locked into that for the upcoming school year. Though even with that, we've asked them to work with us in the really unlikely event we find ourselves remote to the point we don't use that much diesel. At this point, we don't have that requirement, but we will for the coming year.
Good that we're low, but yeah, that could be bad. So good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 4C, approval of payroll claims. Mr. Parkinson.
We have 2 payroll claims for your approval. The May 15th payroll, $580,673.06. May 29th payroll, $581,003.04.
Do I have a motion to approve payroll claims as presented?
So moved.
Dr. Beatty, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mason, questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 4D, proposed 2021 budget timeline and process. Mr. Parkinson.
So around this time of year, we like to lay out the anticipated timeline to meet our statutory requirements for the budget process. So just as a reminder, school corporations and almost all local governments budget on a calendar basis, so from January 1st through December 31st. So this fall, we'll be tasked with adopting a budget for calendar year 2021. So that the highlights on the timeline are, we expect to receive our net assessed values in early August. We would propose to make our proposed budget public around September 9th. Our statutory requirement is posted at least 10 days before the public hearing. So the proposed public hearing date is Wednesday, September 23rd. And then we would look to adopt the budget at the regular October board meeting, which happens to be early in the fall break.
This is more of an informational item on the agenda. Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next. There's no old business this time. Item 6A, consider approval of personnel recommendations. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, included in your board packet are the personnel recommendations here for the past month. And you see a little bit of activity there starting to pick up. One of these in particular I do want to point out is that we're also recommending hire of our first Danville Community School Police Force Police Chief and Officer Matt Oliphant. And I know Matt is here this evening and appreciate his attendance, and I want to congratulate him as we went through our interview process. Matt was clearly our strongest candidate and the best for the job, and we're recommending him tonight along with the other recommendations that we have before the board.
Great. Before we get continued discussion, I'd like Mr. Mason to comment on that process, but do I have a motion to approve the personnel recommendations as presented by Dr. Schaefer? Dr. Beatty, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. McRoberts. Corey, do you want to add to that since you were on the selection committee?
Sure. Yeah, we did our due diligence in posting the position. We interviewed the candidates. Corporal Oliphant did an outstanding job in the interview. Moreover, he's done an outstanding job as our SRO in the time that he's been hired as our SRO here. Many improvements within the school corporation, and I see nothing but great thing ahead for our safety and security for the students and staff with this hire.
Excellent. Congratulations, Corporal Oliphant. Look forward to working with you, continuing to working with you. Any other questions or comments on the personnel report? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Chief.
That's right.
That's
Congratulations, Chief. Item 6B, consider approval of administrator contracts. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, this is just an annual request to extend the administrative contracts by 1 year. This does not do anything to salary or benefits, just merely that contract out the additional year. They ask the board's approval of the administrative contracts as recommended.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the administrative contracts recommended by Dr. Schaefer in the report?
So moved.
Mr. McRoberts, do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Elliott, any questions or discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-2. Did I leave enough room for discussion, gentlemen? Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, let's see. Item 6C, consider approval of 2020 to 2021 textbook rental fees. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, the textbook rental fees are presented to the board tonight for approval. These would be the charges that include textbook and technology rental. Mrs. Walker has put together the recommendation with a lot of information included in that. Pleased to say that in grades 4 through 12, I think with few exceptions, those overall rental costs actually decreased a bit per student. Again, there's a lot of variation when you get to a little bit of middle school and certainly the high school, depending on which courses students are taking, but the averages even of those is decreasing for next year by and large. We will see some increases at K2. The primary reason is our students in kindergarten, first and second grade have not had one-to-one technology. For next year, we are implementing full one-to-one technology for them. So those children will have a new, very nice device, which actually are, I don't see some of our more expensive devices because they have the touch screen that students can use, their younger students. We'll be implementing those. Last year we had a sizable increase in grades 3 and 4 because of going one-to-one. What we're trying to do for the K2 families is to mitigate some of that increase. So even though it will increase, we've cut that increase amount in about half by using some of our COVID relief dollars to help pay for some of those additional costs this year. So we will not be implementing that full amount this year. There'll be some this year and then some for next year for the K2. That is to offset the technology costs. And the students will have those devices. They will also be able to take those devices home and use them from home. But overall, when you look at all grades, those costs, fees are actually decreasing for most part, again, the exception being K2, and we're trying to mitigate some of that increase this year. Would ask the board's approval of the TDR fees as presented here this evening.
Do we have a motion to approve the textbook rental fees presented by Dr. Schaefer? Dr. Beatty, do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Elliott, questions?
What device are the K-2 going to get? For the HB or the?
It's a Dell Chromebook that is the exact same model that they use in their classroom that they have 15 of this year. So it's a 2-in-1 device that flips and then allows the touch access, which K-2 teachers, they think that's more important than any other aspect of it, just due to the tactile stuff that they use, the apps, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So same device that we've already had, just more.
I have 2 comments. One, a reminder that this also includes a warranty that we've not had in the past on these devices. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. Not only includes the device, but we have a full coverage plan that we're providing for every one of those devices. So if a device is broken or accidentally, broken, something like that, it's paid for. Families, we don't have to go to families and ask them to pay additional. We pay for that coverage up front on every student device. We also outfit them with protection devices on top of that. We have licensure fees and other things like that have to be covered as well. But it's one thing that families don't have to worry about unless it's intentionally damaged. Damage to those devices will be covered in full.
I've run into some people who might say, why in the world would you give a kindergartner, a second or first grader a device like this? And so it's wonderful that it has a warranty. Second of all, I thought about that for a minute and kind of agreed with that initial thought. And then I watched a 15-year-old handle his device. So I understand there's really no difference between a kindergartner and a 15-year-old boy at least. But sorry, Lucas, if you're ever watching this when you're older, punishment. But in all seriousness, I think it's great that Mr. Rader and Dr. Schaefer were able to So, and then with our current situation, I mean, there just might be some unavoidable times where those students will have to rely on that even more. So I'm glad they'll have those devices in hand at home. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Consider approval of common school fund loan. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, the district recently applied for a common school fund loan. We have taken out a series of these over the last several years. Each year annually, typically, we pay off one of these and then we apply for a new one. So these are paid through the debt service fund. So each year, year to year, there typically is a net zero additional effect on the debt service fund. What we've got approved for this year is a loan in the amount of $245,500. The common school fund loan is used to supplement our technology budget. We don't receive enough money to adequately run a technology department through our operations. So the common school fund loan is a series of loans intentionally by the state specifically for that purpose. You've been approved. Would ask the board's approval to approve the new common school fund loan as we retire a previous loan off.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the common school fund loan as presented by Dr. Schaefer in our packet? Mr. Mason, do we have a second?
Second.
Dr. Beatty, any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 6E, consider approval of 2021-2022 school year calendar. Dr. Schaefer.
And if I can just add, I want to thank Mr. Rader for his efforts in applying for and making the application for the common school fund loan. Appreciate that effort. As far as the 2021 school year calendar, we actually held off intentionally here 2 or 3 months of bringing this when we normally would, just to try to not add any more to the last couple of agendas that we've had to. So we have a committee each year that looks ahead a couple of years down the road, so we stay scheduled a couple of years in advance on our school year calendar. The 2021 proposed calendar is very similar to the last 5 or 6 years of calendars that we've had. I think it essentially starts school one day later or 1 day earlier and finish 1 day earlier than the 2021 calendar will. All other days are virtually the same in terms of the breaks, lengths of breaks, and those types of things. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. We'll ask the board's approval of that calendar as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the 2021 to 2022 school year calendar? Mrs. Elliott, do we have a second?
Second.
Dr. Beatty, any questions, comments?
I got a question, but I'm not sure I know how to ask it. I guess just in reference to all COVID things, how much flexibility? I mean, we're approving a calendar. I guess I'm not even thinking so much in terms of if we have to push a start date back or something, but I know a lot of colleges have announced removing fall breaks, spring breaks to make sure they get days in. I mean, do we have that? I'm not suggesting we do that, but I just am curious about our flexibility in regard to making changes in the calendar and the steps that need to be taken in case we need to do that.
Just mainly asking for the calendar we've approved for 2020, 2021. We have leeway with that calendar, right?
Well, this is 20. Okay, this is 21, 22.
Still, it's a good
That
question.
could still be, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the same rules would apply to either calendar, and who knows for the future. But essentially, if we found a real need to consolidate that next year's calendar, we would bring that back to the board for approval of significant changes. So if it's just, you get some snow days or something, you're moving the grading period in or something like that, we do that administratively. But if there were some pretty significant changes to the calendar and days off, we would bring that back. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of the colleges have collapsed their breaks to keep their students, I think particularly international students, from traveling and going back and forth. Here locally, maybe not quite as big of consideration, but certainly something that we are paying attention to, and something just, I've sketched out some things just in case if we needed dates, what would that look like? So if we feel that we get in that situation, bring that back to the board for approval. Good question.
Thank you.
I think it's good that we are planning this far out, and Mr. McRoberts, I agree. I mean, we have to have flexibility, and hopefully we won't have to use much of it. One thing I've learned is that the illusion of certainty that I used to have is no longer as strong. So hopefully we can stick with what we have for 2021 and now 21-22. Any other discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 6F, update on Mainline Bakery, milk, ice cream. I like this one every year.
Yeah.
Produce and snack bits. Mr. Parkinson.
So the main reason that we do this one each year, I think, again, it's just informational for the school board, is it's just as an annual update on the bidding process through the purchasing cooperative we participate in, food service. So we're part of the West Indy Purchasing Cooperative, and they handle almost all of our food service procurement. So for this year, our mainline distributors, so the primary place we receive food, produce, dairy, and frozen novelties, those are all being renewed from the prior year. We have bakery and then snack and beverages, two categories that have new winners this year in terms of the procurement. But again, it's mostly an overall reminder that we participate in the cooperative, and it's a good thing in terms of our buying power and ability to drive down food prices.
Very good. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, 6G, consider approval of surplus equipment. Mr. Parkinson.
We have various pieces of equipment that we request your approval to declare as surplus. One of them is a set of technology, a series of HP laptops, and the docking stations, desktop computers, and monitors. It's 45 laptops, 20 of the desktops, 65 monitors. And then we also have a variety of textbooks that we're preparing to declare as surplus. A lot of these are in the English and language arts area. On the technology, depending upon how the surplus process goes, there's a possibility we're going to get those in the hands of educators or folks that participate in the education process. And so that in the event we do find ourselves doing remote learning, even just sporadically, we might be better equipped with some of our staff to provide some support there.
Okay, very good. Do we have a motion to approve the surplus equipment?
So moved.
Mr. Mason, do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Elliott, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. 7A, Superintendent Report. Dr. Schaefer.
Yeah, just a couple items this evening, just a brief update. I know we had some suggestions from the community on our transportation for our K2 students in our walking zone areas, which include Clear Creek and what I refer to as sort of the Mill Street area. So we went back and studied our draft plan right now, and I want to give Dana Parsons credit with thinking through, trying to look for efficiencies, but also trying to provide transportation where we can. And she has found a way that we can, running from the more southerly part here towards the schools, headed north through Clear Creek, we can make 2 or 3 stops in there and pick up kindergarten, first and second grade students and get them directly to North Elementary without them having to walk out to South first. We plan to do a similar exercise over around Mill Street and very low area back in through there and be able to make a series of a couple of stops and get those youngest children directly to North. In the afternoon, it looks like we'll be able to reverse that process as our buses run from North towards South Elementary. We'll be able to drop those students off on the way to transporting the rest of our students over to South. So I appreciate her being able to work that through, because those are not easy things to do, but we're also still finding some of the efficiencies we need to find while maintaining that particular service, which we hope will be beneficial to our families and children. So I just wanted to give an update on that. Also, I just want to kind of check with the board here. I know we talked at the last meeting about upgrading our board docs software to the Pro version from the LT version. We are ready to move forward with that, which will allow much better accessibility and viewing by the public of our video and audio recordings. And we just literally got new cameras installed right before the board meeting, so we're not actually using those yet. We will be using them next month. Board Docs Pro will allow us to take the audio video and splice and link it directly to each agenda item in the future. It will also then allow, as I call A to Z viewing. If somebody wants to view the entire board meeting, that will be posted there as well. It'll be much more fluid and easier use. There's also a much more robust library component to Board Docs Pro, which will allow much more easy access to different documents that the board will have access to even during school board meetings. Some other features as well. Those are two of the more prominent ones. The board is a consensus that will purchase that product. They're offering us a discount. One-time only discount if we commit here before the end of June. So I just want to make sure that the board is all consensus that is a direction you want to head.
You guys have seen the price difference on the years, about $5,000 total. I think that for what it does in increasing, I guess, yeah, constituent access and just an open access to the decisions being made by this group, I think it's helpful. And so I propose that we all five agree to that, to upgrade. It'll also be helpful for boards in the future. Software will be updated and we'll get updates as updates are made. So I think we can just generally say, yes, let's continue to move forward with that.
I will contact our representative and start moving that direction. I would anticipate then a training, it's about a 1 hour training session for board members, probably sometime in July. We'll need to get that on the calendar. That's, yeah, especially if you've been using Board Docs, it's a pretty easy training session. You might even do it maybe in the afternoon ahead of a scheduled board meeting if that's open on the calendar.
I would like to extend a thank you to Dana Perkins in coordinating those pickups and deliveries of the youngest kiddos.
Pass that along. Thank you.
Is that it for your
It is.
presentation?
Thank you.
I just wanted to, this is for Mrs. Karen Perkins, who's on the, I'm looking at Matt Parkinson, that's why I said that, Karen. Karen Perkins, who is probably on here. Speaking of transportation and walk zones and different things like that, I just coincidentally, a member of the Indiana Department of Transportation and a communications team working with them reached out to me about bicycle and walking safety programs and things like that. I did not volunteer you, but I all but volunteered Mrs. Perkins to, and I owe you now so much, your time and butchering your name. Anyway, to a phone call, just with this team as they're planning. I think they can come to Danville and dozens and dozens and dozens of other schools. There's some federal dollars behind this, and it's providing a lot of free bicycle helmets to students, like hundreds of thousands of free bicycle helmets, actually, to Indiana students, and talking about safely, walking to school and away from school, and just hanging out throughout the community, not just transportation to school. But so anyway, I think it'd be a good thing for us to consider participating in the 2020-2021 school year if things are schedules permit something like that. But anyway, that's just kind of in tandem to what we were talking about. So thanks, Mrs. Perkins, if you can do that. Any other items for discussion? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, legislative report. I think the answer is no. I assumed that was the case. My apologies. Dr. Beatty.
What is graduation going to look like
That's a good question.
on July 10th?
Well, we're hopeful to announce that this week. I would tell you tentative plans that are still subject to review by the local county Board of Health. In other words, Dr. Hammond and his team have put together a plan. We've submitted that to the local Department of Health, just waiting for a return call there. First and foremost, we'd like to have an outside exercise on July 10th. that evening. We're looking, we need to finalize, we're looking between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, just to, because of sunlight angle and those types of things, to be able to have a socially distanced program out on the football field. That would be our first choice. Rain event could include, because of social distancing and seats available, could possibly be inside in the gymnasium. We're going to have to limit the amount of attendees and seats in both of those situations. And the really backup plan then is to have only the virtual exercise, which will be available, or for some reason the student couldn't or choose not to attend, they're at least going to be able to have the virtual exercise. The first choice would be to be outside on the football field for a late evening graduation live exercise. Rain backup, again, if approved, would be inside with social distancing requirements. Normally would be a virtual exercise, but any and all of those are planned for July 10th at either 7:30 or 8 o'clock. If we're outside, we'll like be outside. May go as late as 8 o'clock just to help with any temperature and light effects that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Any other points or discussions from the board?
Well, it makes me think what our role will be if we really need to be doing additional handshake this year or not.
Yeah, I'm thinking that there probably will not be handshakes.
Just hugs and kisses.
At least myself, and being in close proximity to students for their health benefit, no handshake, and I will, personally wear PPE, face mask, but let them cross the stage, let them receive their diploma, let them be viewed and recognized appropriately by our parents. We will need to limit seating, even on the football arena. To limit seating, we're looking at trying to include at least 4 guests. I know some districts around us have only been able to include 2. We would like to be able to include 4 so that they can get at least their immediate family to be able to take part and take pride in their kids' graduations.
Maybe an exception could be made.
Yes, I'll reserve the request to hug at least one graduate.
That's a good deal. Lucy will appreciate that. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Mason?
Community input.
Okay, I thought that I will have open to community input if you didn't sign up. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes, and you can come up and speak if you would like. Okay. State your name and address for the record, please.
Okay. Jessica Short, 113 Parkview. So obviously I came last board meeting, and we are new community members and we're homeowners, and have been a part of the Danville community. We've come for about 5 years now in Parkinsville. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Obviously I went back to our community in Deer Creek. We talked about the discussion. Our community members feel more involved than they ever have, even if they're not here. They're hearing what's happening with school meetings and changing perceptions just by the fact that you'll listen. Dr. Shaver, thank you so much for looking with Danville persons after that to see how our kindergarten through second graders can be affected. Because even with 2 or 3 bus stops, that is just exactly what we asked for, right? We didn't want yet everything, we just wanted a small change. And so that's really how you get the community behind you, because I know Clear Creek is a very positive view of the board right now, and we're very thankful for you listening to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Anyone else? Going. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dr. Beatty, second.
Second.
Mrs. Elliott, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you.